Okay guys, this is Unit 4, Segment 3, the reactions of photosynthesis, or photosynthesis, the reaction. And here's a list of vocab words: thylakoid, granum, stroma, photosystem 1, photosystem 2, light-dependent reaction, Calvin cycle / light-independent reaction. Okay, in your notes packet, your task packet, you have a sheet that has this exact diagram on it. You can just flip to that sheet and fill it out, or you can write this in your notes. Either way, you have to have it, and it's the official spot where you're going to see the definitions of some of these terms, okay? So, if you remember, this is a chloroplast. It's an organelle that's found only in plants, plants and animals are both eukaryotic cells, but only plants will have this organelle. It's a chloroplast. Well, we didn't look deep inside the chloroplast. We just said that it had chlorophyll and that it would go through photosynthesis. It was an energy organelle. But now, here's the anatomy of what this organelle looks like. It has an outer membrane, which is the membrane on the outside of the chloroplast. It has an inner membrane, which is the membrane that lies just inside the chloroplast. So inner and an outer, double membrane. Thylakoid is a membrane, this pancake right here, that contains chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is found in these little discs and other pigments as well. These are the little pancakes in the stack of pancakes. Granum is the whole stack. Okay, each individual disc is a thylakoid. A stack of them is granum. Stroma is the area between the membranes and the thylakoids. So it's got a mixture of enzymes and water. This area is where the Calvin cycle occurs. All right, in your notes, I want you to make 2 columns. Okay, the full sheet, 2 columns. Label the left side light-dependent reactions, and label the right side light-independent reactions, or the Calvin cycle. Okay? For the light-dependent, if you depend on something, you're relying on that something. So this is a reaction that depends or relies on the presence of light. This is a reaction that requires light. It's light dependent. It requires light. This reaction takes place in the thylakoids, which are the discs. Okay, in each thylakoid, this reaction is happening. This reaction uses the reactants. What's going in is going to be water, ADP, NADP+, which is just a channel protein, and H+, which is a hydrogen ion. Out comes, from this light-dependent reaction, out comes the products of oxygen, ATP, and ADPH. So you should be writing this under the column that you've labeled light-dependent. So you should put on there, requires light, takes place in the thylakoids, and the reactants and the products. Still under light-dependent reactions, you need to put down some more information. Now, most of what I'm going to share in the next couple of slides is not going to be on the test, but I do want you to have an idea that there's a long process that occurs in this dependent reaction. So what first happens is it enters into photosystem 2. This is just a series of reactions that's called photosystem 2. You might be wondering, well, what about photosystem 1? Photosystem 2 was discovered after photosystem 1. So therefore, it's number 2, but it actually happens first. Photosystem 2 happens first. It absorbs the sunlight. This sunlight energizes the electrons, and we talked about that in the last segment. It raises the electrons to higher energy levels, and they travel down something called the electron transport chain. In your book, there's a beautiful picture of how that's happening in the membrane. Okay? So electron transport chain, and oxygen and hydrogen are left. What happens second is the photosystem 1, which is so weird that it's number 1, but It's called photosystem 1, and it happens second. It absorbs the sunlight. It raises the electrons to a higher energy level. NADP plus bonds with hydrogen ion plus and makes the molecule NADPH, which is very similar to like an ATP kind of molecule. It's an energizing molecule. ATP synthase acts as a protein channel, allowing the hydrogen to pass into the thylakoid. As ADP and phosphate pass through, ATP is made. So basically you just need to know that what comes out is NADPH and ATP. You don't need to know the details on how that all works, but that's what comes out of the light-dependent reaction. So basically the molecules of energy that are going to be needed later in the next reaction are made. This is how those are made. Photosystem 1 and photosystem 2 is how that's made. And they fall under the category of light-dependent reactions, so they do require light. All right, flip side. So now you have on your table that you set up, the column on the right is light-independent reaction, also called the Kelvin cycle. You need to know both. If it's light-independent, it's independent of the need of light. So it works independently. It doesn't need the light. It doesn't need the light in order to happen. It takes place not in the thylakoids, but this is actually taking place in the stroma area, which is the region between the thylakoids and the membrane. Okay, so what goes into the light-independent reaction is actually what came out of the light-dependent reaction. So ATP, NADPH, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere also goes in, okay, and carbon. And then it produces ADP, which because it lost one of the phosphates, because it actually used energy, and it lost a hydrogen, which is also losing energy, so NADP plus, and then sugars come out as the product. You need to know the reactants and products for these. Okay, so here are some details that I want you to write down, but it's going to be less emphasized on the test, okay? So with light-independent reaction, also called the Kelvin cycle, it's happening in stroma. 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 carbon molecules enter the cycle, and there's 12 total carbon molecules. The second step, ATP and NADPH from the light-dependent reaction, are used to turn the 12 carbon molecules into higher energy molecules of ADP and NADP+. Okay. 2 of the 12 carbon molecules are removed from the cycle and used to produce the sugars, lipids, and energy for the plant. The remaining molecules continue in the cycle and will combine with more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at the top of the cycle. So what you really need to know, and it's really this diagram, and I would, even though you do see it in the reading guides, this diagram, I would still write it in your notes. So you have your chloroplast, that is the organelle that we're talking about. Notice these thylakoid pancakes, and they make up the stack called granum. This, my friends, is where light reactions happen. You should write that in. You should draw this out. The light reactions happen in the thylakoid granum. What goes into the light reactions, you ask? The light-dependent reactions, and that is light. So sunlight's going in. Water, H2O, that's what this is saying, H2O, goes in. So light and water enter, and then what comes out is oxygen, O2. And if you remember from the photosynthesis equation, you saw water, you saw light, those were reactants, and the O2 is a product. Now, in the middle part, guys, this is talking about some of the energies. So NADP+, ADP, and then you have ATP and NADPH. These are the higher energy, and they're being made by the light reactions. They will feed in and energize the Kelvin cycle. Because the Kelvin cycle doesn't happen with light, remember? So where does it get its energy? It gets its energy from the ATP and NADPH that was created by the light reactions. So it's still energized. It has a full battery with these molecules. And then it uses them and spits out the dead batteries, okay, that need to get charged by the light reaction. So it's kind of like these things kind of keep going. They go in and come back out, go in to be used, and then come back out. But the Kelvin cycle is another name for the light-independent reactions. They do not need light. Where is it happening, you ask? The stroma. Notice how there's no pancakes right here. It's happening in the stroma area. What goes in? Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is going in. Guys, it's a reactant in photosynthesis. All three of these are the reactants in photosynthesis. These are all the things that are going in. And then what's coming out? This is our sugar. So this is where you see carbon dioxide is being directly made into the sugar. So when I ask, where does most of the mass come for a plant? This is the sugar that stays in the plant, and it's coming from the carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is the main ingredient for plant mass. And then O2 is just released out to the atmosphere. Okay? All right, and that is it. We're done.